Hi, my name is Carson Stannard, and I chose Ralph Lauren for my design research project. Ralph Lauren was born in the Bronx in New York City in 1939, and he actually joined the US Army for a couple of years before returning back to New York City and then taking a job at Brooks Brothers as a salesperson for a short term, but then eventually left and joined the tie manufacturer, Beau Brummel. He started working for Beau Brummel in 1967, and he quickly convinced the president to actually start his own line of ties to sell. And that's where he developed the polo ties. And that's actually where the name polo actually started. And his ties were a huge success and were different from others because they were wider and they were made of higher quality fabrics. Within his first year of selling these ties, he made over $500,000 in sales and was selling them to the most prestigious men in New York City, to people from Neiman Marcus and Bloomingdale's. And within that same year, he created the Ralph Lauren Corporation and started to branch out into men's sportswear. His men's sportswear was a huge success, so much so that the buyers at Bloomingdale's actually approached Ralph Lauren to start selling his entire line and actually create a store within Bloomingdale's, which is still existent today. And Bloomingdale's actually really helped Ralph Lauren to develop his brand and his menswear label within their store. After his success with Bloomingdale's and having his store open, in 1971, he actually opened his own standalone store and was becoming a huge success within menswear. And he, in 1971, started to develop women's wear. But in 1972 was the first year that he actually created a full women's wear collection and brought that into the market. The collection was a huge success, and he initially created the women's wear collection drawing inspiration from his wife Ricky, who was very much a tomboy and fit very well with the Ralph Lauren brand. And the women's wear collection was a huge success, and he's developed for women's wear ever since. Looking at his past collections and even his most recent ones, there are certain reoccurring themes that Ralph Lauren really likes to draw inspiration on. And within the film Very Ralph, he actually touches on this subject. So there are four main themes that Ralph likes to draw inspiration on. The first one being uh, Western, safari, preppy, and interestingly enough, the 1920s. Ralph Lauren really enjoys spending his time outdoors. He has an iconic ranch in Montana, actually, and so you sort of see these outside influences in his collections, and with themes like Western and Safari. He introduced themes like these in the early 80s, and they did really well and fit with the brand so much that he continues to touch upon it today. Interestingly, he also likes to draw inspiration on the glamorous lives of the rich. This all American preppy lifestyle is a reoccurring theme that Ralph has really touched on for years, and you can see it through his collections and his advertisements, especially. He also deeply admired the 1920s and kind of that glamour and the parties during that decade, and really likes to touch on that time period as well. His iconic pieces actually come from his polo label, which is most recognizable by the polo rider embroidery on his shirts. The first polo shirt was actually introduced in 1972, and it quickly became a staple in men's and women's wardrobes ever since. From that same label, he developed the polo shirt, the Oxford button down, and polo chino pants that have all remained in style for decades. In 1983, Ralph Lauren felt there was a lack of choices and quality in the home furnishings market, so he developed and created the Ralph Lauren Home label, where he designed home decor and home furnishings, and it's still a success today. He was actually the first designer to really branch out into this market, so it really started this idea of a designer lifestyle brand. Ralph Lauren actually has a really strong passion for film. In his documentary, Very Ralph, you really get to see how he directs advertisements and campaigns, much like a film would be directed. And sometimes they actually look like something out of a movie. So it's no surprise that he would dress and design for some of the most iconic films like Annie Hall and The Great Gatsby. Um, the Great Gatsby was especially significant because it really touched on that idea that I was mentioning earlier of that 1920s glamour that Lauren really likes to invoke in his collections. Ralph Lauren today is still designing with his team for his collections, and he has no plans to retire soon. He's still passionate about his brand as he once was. In 2018, he actually celebrated the 50th anniversary of his iconic label with a massive fashion show held in Central Park. It included A-list celebrities like Hillary Clinton and Oprah Winfrey, and the show presented over 100 looks with some of Ralph's most iconic themes. As well, his son David Lauren serves as the current vice chairman and chief innovation officer of the company. So the Ralph Lauren label is still running through the family. The business itself does extremely well. Ralph Lauren generates around $7 billion in sales annually. And when he reached his first $1 billion in sales in 1998, the company went public on the New York Stock Exchange and can still be traded publicly today. And as far as licensing agreements go, Ralph Lauren does license his name out to multiple corporations, and some of his top partners are Luxottica, L'Oreal, Peerless, and Hanes brands, some of which produce and sell his iconic fragrances and his eyewear. Personally, I think Ralph Lauren has made tremendous influences on the fashion industry. He's a global name and well-known designer globally, and I think he was really a pioneer for how a design company can expand their growth and their design. He was one of the first designers to really create this idea of a lifestyle brand where it's not just about designing the clothes, but it's also about designing for interiors and decor. And I think when you look at many designers today who have the similar lifestyle brands like Nicole Miller, Kate Spade, and Missoni, they've all branched out of just designing clothes and offering their customers this lifestyle designer brand. As well, I think he really led the way for having multiple labels under one name. When you look at his brand, he has his iconic polo label. He has Lauren by Ralph Lauren, which is much more of a mass market collection. He has his collection label, and he has a purple label, which offers high quality and luxury menswear. And you see this with many brands today as well, that they have their designer label and then they offer another label that's offered at a lower price point. And interestingly enough, Ralph was also one of the first luxury brands to launch an e-commerce website in 2001. And I think it's really interesting to, look at that now. And it's hard to think about a luxury brand not having a website of their own in today's day and age. So again, he was leading, he was a pioneer in offering an easier access to consumers through an e-commerce website. Personally, I really admire Ralph Lauren. I love his designs. I love his label, and I love, the collections that he creates. And I think he is I think my favorite aspect of him is he is a great businessman as well as a designer, and I think he's been a huge success because of it. And you see that with the numbers that he's made and sales. And this was my works cited.